Welcome back to Cerebrevore. I'm your host, Jason. Today we have Cerebrevore Confidential. Instead of a panel discussion, which is kind of hard to get together here with the holidays in America and all, I've got two one-on-one interviews. First, I talk with Amy Lee Rodriguez about her gaming experiences and specifically one-on-one gaming with her husband, Carl, who you'll know both of them from the Geomologist Presents podcast. And then I'm going to talk to Joe Richter of Hindsightless, who was also the GM of the first ever Pathfinder 2 actual play podcast, homebrew actual play podcast, Wheel or Woe, which is still a very popular podcast to this day. Even though they've stopped making new episodes, people still download and listen to it. It still has a great fan base. And Joe and I are going to talk about, well, sometimes things are tough on the GM and tough decisions the GM has to make and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first up is Amy. So let's get into it.
Most unlikely of villains, schools of playing and for pause. Does it talk? Does it know how? Does it bottle? Does it meow? Let on the Cerebrevore. Heaven show him so much more. Leave your brains at the door.
Joining me today is Amy Lee Rodriguez, who you might know from the Geomologist Presents podcast. How are you doing today, Amy?
Doing well, and yourself?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for asking. So, for our listeners that haven't heard before, maybe if you could talk a little bit about your history with role-playing games and experience.
Well, it started, I guess I need to say, in a dark closet. Actually, that's not true at all. My first GM was my brother. He wasn't very good, and it was Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, just like Carl got the same pack for Christmas. I think everyone did. To this day, we've never finished that campaign. Then from there, it just kind of morphed. For a while there, he played some sort of G.I. Joe thing. Kind of, that's mid to late 80s. I don't even remember what it was called. Then I took a hiatus until I married my husband. Actually, a little before that, but yeah. So didn't get back into it until the early aughts.
But you've been playing kind of steadily since then?
Oh, yes.
Excellent. And you've got to play a wide variety of games, actually.
I think so. My least favorite is Dungeons and Dragons. But there's many reasons for that. Maybe if we did something that's not a 5th edition, where I'm not doing dungeon crawls and all kinds of things like that, it wouldn't be so bad. But that Call of Cthulhu, I like Savage Worlds, played Pathfinder, Dreamlands, but I don't remember which one that is. Just a variance of them. I'm sure Carl has a list.
I'm sure he does. No, and I've got to play with you in a number of different games, and we've always had a great time. Lots of fun. So, in fact, Twilight 2000.
Oh, I like it. And then we played your birthday game.
Yep, you play aces and eights. You've been playing in the Jackals game that Carl's running, right? Correct.
That one. And we have a new one that my husband started, the Cthulhu Confidential, I think, is the one-on-one that we've been doing.
Right. And that's kind of the one I wanted to talk to you about tonight, if that's, or today, whenever people are listening to it this morning, whenever they hit play. But yeah, so now you've played one-on-one games with Carl before.
Correct.
Yeah, and you've even played one-on-one Call of Cthulhu games with Carl before, right?
Correct. And I've also done one-on-one games at some of the conventions.
Okay, great. But the Cthulhu Confidential is a different set of rules than what you're used to with a regular Call of Cthulhu.
Correct. It's less dice and less rolling for things. So if I have, I'm looking at my character sheet. So if I have my investigative analysis, I don't necessarily roll for them, as long as it's high enough. Then when my general abilities, I either roll 1 6-sided dice or 2 or however many is assigned to that on my character sheet.
Right. So it's it's one of those games which kind of like the different gumshoe games where you don't have to worry about not finding a clue. The question is maybe how much information you get with that clue and then saving your rolls for you know complications or conflicts potentially, right? If you have to get into fisticuffs with somebody or something like that.
Correct. There's other things that now Carl does it. I'm assuming it's part of the game where if I have an investigative ability and I want to find a clue, but maybe I'm not very strong in it, I haven't
Mm-hmm.
leveled. As long as I use a way of justifying it with one of my other abilities, he lets me do it.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the idea. So the you, I don't know if you probably heard this story before, but one of the reasons the gumshoe system came in about, and this is a modification of that, but one of the reason you know this original system came about was the idea of people would play Call of Cthulhu, and they would fail, say, a library use roll when they're doing research, and so they couldn't finish the scenario because they didn't find what they needed because they failed a die roll, and the idea is that you know information you need to have to finish the game, to finish the scenario, should never be hidden behind die rolls. You know, and if you have that investigative skill, you should be able to get that clue. So, you know, so you can move forward.
Correct.
So, yeah. So how do you how do you like playing one-on-one compared to with the group? I know they're different, but
Very different.
yeah.
It's a razor that cuts both ways, I guess you could say. One respect, I really like it because I'm not dependent on another party member to achieve my goal. And they don't run off and do something else that I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Come on back here. Or I guess you could say it's the same. We also play with friends of ours and they're new to gaming, so they really won't jump in and take initiative.
Mm-hmm.
So they wait for me to do something. So it's more freeing, more fun. I don't feel like I have to be the leader of the pack all the time.
Right.
In essence, I am if I'm playing on my own, but it's that messed up logic I have. And at the same time, sometimes it's a little harder to play on my own because I don't have other players that have something that works well with my character so they can bounce off or I can ask them to do something. So I like
Right.
both.
Well, yeah, it's a trade-off. So I've done some one-on-one gaming, and it's also maybe a little bit more work because it's only you and the GM. So when you're playing in a group, you know, with the other people talking and doing things, you can kind of get a break. And that's especially true for the GM because the GM can kind of sit back and let the party members discuss plans and things. But that doesn't happen during a one-on-one game. You have to, you're laser the whole time. You're focused and you're doing you know you're 100% engaged. You have to be.
Have to be. I'm one of these weird players where every scenario I have 3 different ways in my mind I could go. And I think you know this, and a lot of times
Yeah.
it's off the rails. But I always look for a way out of a situation that doesn't necessarily cause a conflict.
Hmm.
Sometimes there is no way around it. It's just which of the conflicts is not going to kill me quicker. Um, but when playing on my own, I still have 3 choices. And I have to take my clues, I guess you could say, from the GM and what he says.
Hmm.
I'm sorry about the dog.
That's fine. Not a
Okay.
problem.
Um, I have to take my clues from what he's saying in order to choose which of the 3 I think my character would do.
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely. It's definitely a different experience. It's definitely an experience I'd recommend people try the
Oh,
one-on-one gaming.
really good. If you have the right GM and they can kind of give you the hints you need or know the way you play well enough that they can insinuate something to you and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I know, try this.
Hmm. Definitely. So let me ask you this. So we'll getting back to Cthulhu Confidential a little bit. So you've got to play in a wide variety of different kind of games, from fantasy to sci-fi to West or Old West. You know, you guys play Deadlands,
Oh yes.
and you know, we played a modern, you know, modern day rock and roll band in a Savage Worlds game, and so you played all kinds of different things.
I try.
Yeah. So what do you think about the time, like the hard boiled, you know, like the Call of Cthulhu, or even like through Confidential, like up to the 40s? That do you have a favorite time, like a favorite kind of setting to play in, or you have things you prefer over others?
Hmm. I don't know. I tend to like Cthulhu a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not a huge fan of modern day, just because I feel like I live in it already, not an escape.
Right.
I don't mean fantasy because that's not reality, but I would say probably 1800s up to about maybe the 1940s, somewhere in there. I absolutely love history. So
Hmm.
from about World War I to up to World War II, I tend to study that a lot for no real reason, but that just kind of tends to be where I hang out.
No, yeah, I think it's a fascinating time period, and the advantage of that time period too is that it's not so far in the past that it's out of touch. You know, it's pretty easy to relate to, and pretty easy to you know, understand the technology levels and things like that. Where if we're talking, you know, ancient Egypt or ancient Rome, we you know, if we've studied it, maybe we know, or watched Rome, I guess. Although it doesn't show you know, everything they do during the day, right? But it's a lot easier to kind of grasp what the 1930s were like than you know, say the 630s, right?
Absolutely. Now I do like medieval times quite a bit from the simple fact that so much of what they go through can parallel to us. I forget what the saying is: if we don't understand history, we're bound to repeat it.
Hmm.
And in some ways, I think we are starting to repeat some of it. We can start with the pandemic on that one.
Right.
But I mean, if you go even back to the Norman conquest, even up to that area there, I mean, it's all about freedom. And that's pretty much what we always fight about and fight for. So, and then the technology. So, okay, they fought with swords. Then their big thing was the what bow and arrow, I believe. Back
Hmm.
then, the bow was the newest one on the park there because it could go the furthest. But we still have that nowadays with the newer, bigger planes or newer, bigger boats. So I
Yeah.
would say back to the Roman times, I still feel as though parallels to us quite a bit. But
Hmm.
hopefully that answered the question.
No, I think it's, and actually you were in that the was it Cthulhu Invictus game that Carl ran as well.
I'm in another one like that. I forget which one it is, but we play. There's three of us, and I play. She's a Roman senator's wife, and I can't say too much because I don't remember. It might be a test game. I don't know
Hmm.
how much I'm allowed to say,
Right.
but it was a lot of fun. And basically, you get to go back and play something from the past that you've researched. So trying to keep my character where it be legitimate is not as easy, but certainly a test.
Right. Yeah, lots of fun. So, it, I guess maybe my second last question would be: do you have a favorite character, or maybe somebody that you've played in the past that you thought was
I would say my current favorite is Kasha.
okay? Hmm.
Just because she's so completely outside of what I normally play. She's getting ready to take over the world. They're floating down the boat now, and you know, I don't want to say too much about that. Spoilers, because Carl hasn't done the update on that one, but I would say that one fits my dynamic a lot because I have to prep for it and choose the characters that go and what way we're going, how much fuel. It is an OCD's like dream game.
Right. And for folks that aren't familiar, don't listen to the Geomologist Presents game recap. Shame on you. but she's talking about the Twilight 2000 game,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, which is a lot of fun.
Oh, we've had a lot of fun, and I still have your character. Your character is floating down the river with us. I have plans for your character.
Yeah.
But try not to go too off rails with him. Come back, you can ease into him. It won't be so bad. But yeah,
Yeah,
no,
if my work schedule ever changes so I can get back in, I'd love to get back in that game. I
yeah.
really enjoyed playing it. So
It's
I guess my last question for you, I want to be precious to your time. My last question for you is there anything you would like to promote or tell people to check out today,
as far as gaming.
as far as gaming or anything else?
Um, I don't know. I mean, we just had Giving Tuesday not too
Mm-hmm.
long ago. And as you know, I have a foundation, the Crush Foundation, which helps their chronic disease patients, and we help educate and fundraise and advocate on their behalf. And that's that was a great thing for Tuesday. Um, I think this month coming up, all from December, we're trying to do random acts of kindness. So I would say, why not run a game for somebody, or go to your local gaming store and just take them a card to say thank you, because they work really hard. I know our local gaming store goes out of their way to help us, and we couldn't love them more.
I think that's a great recommendation, and there will be a link to the Crush Foundation in the show notes. Everybody can go listen to or go check out. Great charity. So,
Well, thank you, and you've always supported it. We appreciate it.
no, I'm happy to do so. Very happy to do so. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. You have a great night
Okay, you too. Take care.
whenever you're listening to it.
For this segment, I'm joined by Joe from the Hindsightless podcast, and we're going to talk about some times when being the GM isn't always fun.
Well,
How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good, Jason. How you doing?
Excellent. Looking so we both we run games and played in games where sometimes the GM has to do things they really don't want to do, right? And there are different degrees of this. So I of course one of these is character death. So when I think about of course recently you're running a Cyberpunk 2020 game currently, and recently one of the players made kind of a bad tactical decision and died as a result. And I mean it's not that you did anything to kill him, but it's never fun to tell a character or tell a player,
No,
sorry.
I hate it, man. Like I actually really hate it. And I know we're not supposed to. We're supposed to love it or something, but it always bums me out, But that's the dice are gonna do what the dice are gonna do. That's why I like to roll all my dice in front of the players, because it takes some of that guilt and bad feeling away, and I can put it on the dice.
Right. Yeah, and I know people that'll do, like in old school games or like random encounters and things, they'll have the players roll those dice. Like the GM will be, okay, well, roll me this and this and this. Oh, well, you rolled 12 ogres attacking you, or whatever it is, right? It's so
well, when you can put some of that onus, some of that like the deadly dangers of the world onto the players, it takes a little bit of load off of us as game masters, as dungeon masters.
Right, because we don't. I mean, the other situation I remember when I was in one of your games was when Jules was playing in a previous Pathfinder game, not the one we're currently in. This is Jules from NZ. People should go check her podcast out, definitely. But she and she also is the GM for Fate of Eisen, so check that out as well. But she had a she was playing. What was she playing? I don't know. She's a druid or
a druid.
She had a pet, right?
Yep.
A companion that died.
Mm-hmm.
And
One
that
that
was a
she
tough
really,
session.
really likes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's totally tough. We lost a character early on in our Wrath of the Righteous game. And that was a bummer. That still has reverberations for me up to this day, because I had stuff planned. There's stuff in motion that was triggered because of that character, right? That I couldn't just like delete because it's part of what's going on in the world. Right. So it'll happen, and there won't be that like same, emotional pull to it that it would have. So yeah, shit like that happens, and it's no good, but it's part of the game. It's absolutely part of the game.
Right. And it's not through a fault of the GM, and especially when it's a result of player decisions, right?
Right.
Players' tactical decisions, which kind of was a little bit on both those, right? Because the one we're fighting a swarm where the companion died, animal companion died, and we were fighting a swarm, and we were really ill equipped to do so. We probably would have been better off running away.
Just running off, yeah.
And the same thing with the Cyberpunk 2020, I mean, gunfights in that game are just super deadly. It's what they are. It's just, so you definitely want to avoid them if you can.
Especially if like the mission is mostly over already.
Right. Yeah. Because your mission's not typically going to be kill all these people. It's going to be do this thing and get out.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are other times when it's not those kind of things, when it ends up actually being a little bit on you as a GM. Although this one isn't totally on you, and this also relates to your Pathfinder game that we're currently playing, the Wrath of the Righteous game, is that you've been doing some deep research, and you found out we've been doing some things wrong with my monk with the grappling. Now, I say this isn't totally on you because all the Pathfinder stuff, there's SRD online, it's all available. So the player of that monk, who we won't mention who that is, the player of that monk very well could have researched all this and figured this out themselves. But maybe we'll talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So, Randor, our monk, is an amazing grappler, and we do a lot of grappling. And so I'd like to make sure I have a full grasp of how, fun pun there, a full grasp of the rules on how that stuff's going to work, since it's coming up a lot. And a question that's come up in a few of our sessions is that player, we won't name who they are, has asked, can I make a grapple check as an attack of opportunity? And I think for the most part, in those sort of situations, I err on the side of, I don't care, like, let's do it. But then doing deeper research, I found out that you can't, because grappling is a separate thing than an attack. They're different, even though they're resolved the same. They're in separate categories, basically. And so you can't do that. And it sort of makes sense because grappling can be it's very powerful if you're really good at it.
Right. So yeah, and definitely the unknown player could have, researched that and sorted that out too. And really that was on the player to some, although it's the player and the GM both should know the rules, right?
Yeah.
So, and especially if you're playing if you pick a character that has a bunch of special stuff, is the player, I mean, really, especially when you're a year into the game, you should understand how your special stuff works. Right?
Yeah, but to be fair, with Pathfinder, there are a lot of niche rules, and specific. The mindset is specific beats general when it comes to rules in Pathfinder. But if there are no specific rules, then the general rule applies, and you just have to. It's we talked about it before. I feel like the book, like James, whatever his name is. What's the Paizo's guy's name? I can't think of it right now. Anyway, I feel like one of those writers of Pathfinder was a lawyer at some point in their life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you find out you're doing a rule wrong, hopefully you can go to the player and just be like, hey, by the way, we've been doing this wrong, so let's correct it, and that player won't have a throw a fit or anything.
Right. And the attack opportunity thing is that big of a deal. Now, the other thing you found, which we can make some less effective at grappling, is a bigger deal. Of course, I'm not going to lose sleep. I mean, the player's not going to lose any sleep over that.
Right.
It's, because it is what it is. But yeah, so not only do you have to say, hey, by the way, you can't do attacks opportunity or grapples attack opportunity anymore, you also now are not as good at grappling.
Yeah, that player is one less better at grappling now, because a bonus that they were getting to their grapple checks shouldn't have been applying to their grapple checks, because it has to deal with grappling and attacks being in those two separate different categories. They're not the same thing, even though they are resolved the same way.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, though, is just a matter of picking. It comes down to picking the right people to play with.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're playing with friends and people that kind of understand, then they're probably not going to, have hissy fits over these kind of things. But well, that's not fair. Hissy fits the wrong word, because some of these, but like the rules misunderstandings. Yeah, I mean it is what it is. I don't really think people should get bent out of shape over that. Although I can definitely see people getting bent out of shape.
Oh yeah, I have seen people get bent out of shape. Trust me, many times.
Yeah, the character death thing's a little different because people get attached to their characters, and so definitely don't want to make any light of that. That's not my intention.
Well, right, but it as dungeon master, it comes down to playing the monsters smart, right? You don't want to play your monsters like they're just there to get murdered, which I have a bad tendency to do. But you also don't want to, I don't know, man. It's finding that balance. Do you go like full out total this monster is there to murder everybody mode? Because you probably can.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because recently in that game, we fought a chimera, right? We fought this. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
a flying monster.
And our party does not have very much in the far. We have some ranged attacks, but not a lot. And that unknown player's monk specifically doesn't have anything. So well, that's not fair. He has a sling, but really he has nothing. Right. So when this thing is sitting flapping its wings 40 feet above us, hitting us with breath weapons, we're pretty much just sitting ducks.
Yeah, that was a devastating opening move. And that's the thing. Like I could have, had I wanted to, just kept that thing flying the whole time. You do have a wizard in the party, so eventually, the wizard can huck some pretty serious damage at pretty far range. So you guys would have had some, recourse to affect that thing. But one, it would have taken forever, and two, it would have been boring for everybody else. So you gotta, that's the balance, right? You got to play the monster smart, but you also got to keep it fun and engaging for the players.
Oh, definitely. And I think that was a fun, engaging. I was going to say, especially early on, but really that whole fight was fun. And it was engaged. It was definitely engaging because we had a couple players go down, right? A couple characters go down. But the opening of that really was well done, because you showed up, you did the breath weapon, and then it landed and prepped, and so it landed, and then it got 3 or 4 or 5 attacks opportunity on the first player to run up to it, which was great. I thought that was really, it was much. So earlier in this game, I guess spoilers for Wrath of the minor spoilers for Wrath of the Righteous, there's this point where you're fighting this demonic insect, and you have to go in the hives, or demonic insect swarm, and you go in a hive and do stuff. That fight wasn't very dynamic.
Right.
You know what I mean? We basically, the dwarf monk ran up, grappled this thing right away, and basically everybody just pounded on it till it died.
Yeah.
I mean, that was that fight. But
that's this big few fights,
Yeah. Where with the Chimera one, although it ended up being that way because you didn't take back to the air, it ended up being that eventually, right?
Right.
Which we talked about after the session. Probably you should have dropped a breath, hit the dwarf with another breath weapon once he had it pinned.
Totally, man.
Or wrestled, yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's, again, that's what it comes out, like, paying attention and just finding that balance. That's the tricky biscuit, man. That's where us DMs earn our money, right? Is by finding that balance.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely something players need to be, especially if you're new to RPGs, which probably not too many people listen to this are, but you have to give the GM some leeway in these things, right? Give the DM some leeway because it isn't an easy job by any means.
Right. I just realized, like 5 years ago, if I would said that's where us dungeon masters make our money, everyone would be like, "Oh yeah." But now people might be like, "Oh, is he a paid?" No, I'm not a paid dungeon master.
That's true. Which I
That
mean,
was a metaphor.
I have no issues at all with a paid dungeon master thing.
Yeah, no, totally cool. More power to you.
Yeah, more power to people. And the thing is, there are groups out there that just want to be players that have, once you get middle age or more, you've got the income to do this hobby. You've got, because this is, I guess we're just wandering around here a little bit, folks. But we'll bounce over to.
We're talking about GMing. We're talking about GMing.
Yeah. But and I'm going to take us on a little tangent off, but this hobby is interesting because you can play role-playing games 100% free. There are games that are 100% free online. You can get all the resources online. It'll cost you whatever electricity is to power up your device, but really you don't have to put any money at all into this hobby, and you can definitely play years and years long campaigns, have all the fun in the world. Even like this Pathfinder, Pathfinder SRD is online. You don't have to pay a cent, and you could be playing Pathfinder, right?
I played Pathfinder for free for the first 7 or 8 years I played Pathfinder.
Yeah. So, but on the other end of that, you have folks, especially ones like us that played as kids and then had a break and come back in the hobby and all, where, we have a disposable income for hobbies and things we do. And so it can be a really expensive hobby too, right? Especially if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and do Kickstarters and, buy all this stuff. So you can buy, you can spend a lot of money on it too. But that's where, when you get in that demographic, that's where the paid DM thing comes in. Because, you have a group like, hey, we really want to play Pathfinder, but nobody's really wants to DM it. Well, we'll just pay somebody to DM it, and it's win-win.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. So I definitely have no grudge at all towards the idea of the professional DM, the paid DM. I think so maybe they're two different categories. So the paid DM, I think, is totally cool. I got no issue with that. The idea of doing certified GMs and all that, I think I have an issue with that.
Yes. No, I saw it. I don't know if it was serious or not, but somebody on Twitter the other day posted that they just got their Grandmaster Dungeon Master certificate, and I was just like, I hope that's a joke.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, in today's world, let's be fair. I can see if conventions or if, say, like the Pathfinder Adventures League, if they want to, but I don't even know how you do it because it's a hobby.
They don't do it. You don't do it.
But if they wanted to have some kind of whatever it is, some kind of, I don't know how you do it. I mean, if it's in person and you're running in a store or something, and you're playing for kids, they say, hey, listen, we got to do a background check because they're kids. But I mean, you're going to chase a lot of people away.
You're talking about getting certified.
Yeah, they're different things, right? And for Pathfinder, and I don't play Adventures League or any of that stuff, but if you had to sit there and, before your Pathfinder event or D&D, before you do one of these leagues, whatever they are, right? Then you need to attend this 1 hour webinar to just make sure you're doing it the Pathfinder way and you understand what we're doing. I wouldn't have an issue with that per se, right? Because obviously they want the games to be run about the same way across the board, and that makes sense. So if you had to attend something and get a certificate saying, yeah, I've attended the Pathfinder thing, so I can be a Pathfinder Adventure League DM, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. But the idea of a certified GM, you know,
I've been certified Grandmaster, dude. Don't worry about it. I'm the shit.
I don't know.
I have my certificate right here, just hot off the printer.
Right. Well, that's yeah. I mean, what's the governing body? I mean, you get back to
Exactly.
OSR, right? What's the governing body of the OSR, right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh man.
or the governing body for RPGs. I mean, that's somewhere where Pathfinder and Wizards of the Coast have an advantage because they, you're playing their game and they can, to some degree, have a little bit of control.
Right. Yeah.
But that's why like DM's Guild works for Wizards of the Coast. They can say, listen, you can publish adventures as long as you follow our guidelines.
Well, Paizo did that too. They launched, a year ago, maybe less, this thing called Pathfinder Infinite. And it's DM's Guild, but for Paizo people.
Well, which is cool because it lets people get in there and write adventures and do stuff. The key is before somebody gets into that, somebody that aspiring game writer or creator gets into that make sure they read the fine print.
Yeah,
and understand what rights you're giving up by doing that license.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the only important part is to make sure you understand what you're giving up, as opposed to just doing it on your own. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the last thing I want to talk about as GMs is how games can help when they have, or how maybe not games, but how good mechanics can help. Right. So there's sometimes the game system can really help you out in being a GM. And a good example of this, I know there's a super Pathfinder heavy, section of the show, but currently in Wrath of the Righteous, we're leading an army of paladins, right? And they have some mass battle rules that are super simple that have to make it a lot easier. Because imagine if we were, if those rules were a lot more complicated and you having to deal with that, right?
Yeah. The fact that they are so basic and simple, it's nice. It's just you could do a whole battle in like a couple seconds. Really, it's just like 2 or 3 dice rolls can decide the entire battle, and then you just have to have the players realize that it's not the same as like a round by round combat, but it's awesome, man. I like the mass battle system in there.
Right, and there's still decisions at least for the leader of the army to make.
Right,
whatever players the general, they can decide the posture of the army and how aggressive they're going to attack, and if they want to flank and things like that. So there are tactical decisions in there.
Yeah. And then if you were playing like a longer homebrew campaign using those rules, there are rules on leveling up the army. Basically, they learn different tactics and stuff.
So mechanics like that can really help a GM out, because if you would say you didn't have that book in front of you, right? You didn't have the Wrath of, because you like to run homebrew campaigns,
right?
But if you didn't have Wrath of the Righteous, and you're like, well, we're going to do this cool campaign, and you're going to lead these troops into battle, and you had to come up with that on your own.
That's a lot more work. that's not where my mind goes when I'm building campaigns. Right? I don't want to spend a lot of time making up rules.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the mass battle rules. Actually, I know maybe I was not critical of them, but when we first did them, I said, oh, well, maybe it kind of isn't great because the players can't really affect this and that. But I've really come around to really liking them.
Nice.
I really like the speed that they go, and there's real consequences to after the battle too.
Yeah.
So I think having mechanics like that, that's nice. And we see another game, like we both love Cyberpunk 2020,
right?
Is a game system, and there are vehicle rules in other books, but in the core rule book, there isn't a whole lot for like chases, vehicle chases, vehicle to vehicle combat, and stuff like that.
Right.
So, but you wanted to have that in the current game that we're running.
Yeah, it sort of came up, so I was just kind of going off the cuff,
But I think it's been working out pretty good. I think you've done a really good job with that. I mean, you've allowed the driver, because we have the one player who wanted to be a driver, so you've given him the option of doing vehicle maneuvers and things in there. So I think now, did you just basically take the person-to-person combat and adjust that to work with cars, or did you get ideas from somewhere else when you built those rules?
I looked I looked for some stuff, and like you mentioned, there's other Cyberpunk 2020 books like Home of the Brave and some others that have more in-depth rules, but I wanted something a little lighter, so I found a hit location chart for vehicles that somebody had posted somewhere. I don't remember where, sorry person. And just kind of, and just sort of went from there. But it would have been nice if I had like a cool set of rules to use, because I bet there are some cool ones.
Oh yeah, there's some, but what you've been doing is cool. And he had the last game, he had this motorcycle coming up alongside him trying to shoot him, and he was able to describe how he wanted to slide the rear of the limousine to knock the bike over, and that worked out really well.
Yeah, man, Cyberpunk's just a fun game. Cyberpunk 2020 is just a fun game to run.
Well, it is, and you know what I'm always not amazed with, but one of the things I love about Cyberpunk 2020 is the fact that the combat is cinematic. It's not there's no RPG that's realistic combat, right?
Right.
But they did bait, Mike Pondsmith, who's an amazing game designer, went and he did look at FBI shootout statistics and things, and the data that they've collected for shootings over the years, and that's built into the Cyberpunk 2020 engine, and so it does have that feel of realism, but it's not so baked in that it takes a long time to run. It still goes quick.
Yeah,
it's a perfect balance of quote unquote realism and speed of play for me. With guns being deadly like they should be.
Yeah, and if you're good at adding up, doing really basic arithmetic real quick, because if you're shooting an assault rifle in 2020, you're rolling like 66 plus 2. So sometimes that's the longest part, is gathering those 6 dice and adding them all together. But if you're one of those people that can just look at the pips and just be like, that's 19 and go like right away, then it could be really fast.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate that with that game, but I really think Cyberpunk 2020 it still stands up today.
I agree.
Yeah.
The layout of the book, not so much, but the rules of the book, yes, 100%.
It's funny because I've gone back and we've been playing some games that like Cyberpunk 2020 that is an older game we played as kids, and then, or not kids. I mean, I was in the Army when I played Cyberpunk 2020 in the 90s, but and I've gone back and I've been playing AD&D First Edition and doing stuff with that. And you go, and even Palladium, we've been playing Palladium Fantasy First Edition, and we go back and it's you think about the games you played back in the day with rose-colored glasses, whatever, where you're thinking, wow, this was a great game and how great it is. And then we go back and look, and some things do stand out or stand up. Some things are still really good, but we look at the layouts of some of these books and we're like, no, this sucks.
It does suck, man. Like when we had that character die in our Cyberpunk 2020 game, there was a chance they could have been alive, but those rules were in a whole nother section that weren't in the section that we were looking at that was about death and dying. Right. And that kind of shit it's like, why not? Why wouldn't you?
And with Palladium Fantasy, the rules are all over the place in that book. They're just scattered. And it's like, wow, it's like, where's saving throws? And it took us, looking back and forth so we found it all, and it's all good, but it's and AD&D, the rules are spread across 3 books and supplements. Some of the capacities of like sacks and backpacks and things and pouches are in one of the supplements that came out, like where you get character sheets and things. They're not in any of the 3 core books. So, and I love AD&D First Edition. We played.
No, absolutely.
As we're recording this, I played the night prior,
nice.
and we switched. We created new characters, playing a different part of Greyhawk.
Okay.
And I've got this halfling thief, and he's doing his thing, and we talk about immersion and all this thing, and definitely I had my pucker factor was up because a first level thief, even a halfling, I have like an average of like 25% chance of doing most of the thiefy stuff, and so and actually, I didn't find traps on the chest, but I failed to pick locks. So one of the big burly fighter types broke the lock opened the chest, and then the trap went off because I didn't find the trap because I suck at finding traps.
Nice, man.
So, but I'm loving playing that game, having a lot of fun with it. But with the immersion, it's definitely because you have low hit points, and it's a pretty deadly game, especially at low levels. You're just hanging in there. Oh, what's he gonna roll? And that it definitely sucks you in, which is great. So
yeah, like whenever we play our next session of Palladium Fantasy and we're actually doing the heist part, my character maybe is going to be very nervous because they have like 0 hit points and crap AC, man. If anything kicks off, maybe he's in trouble.
Well, maybe has 6 hit points.
Yeah,
and pretty much and pretty much every weapon in the game does at least a D6 damage.
So it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. That's going to be really fun.
It's going to be tense. It's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to that game. I'm glad we started at first level. I toyed with the idea of starting you guys at second or third level. But I think doing this initial heist, because it's making you guys think out of the box and plan things out. Because you don't want to get into combat.
Right.
So you guys know you have to try to do this smartly. And it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed that, and I do like the Palladium system. I think if somebody went through and reorganized the book, like a modern editing job, I think it'd be a lot better. But I don't know that the rules themselves are that bad. And of course, you'll have to decide that after we have combat.
Right. Yeah. But so far, I think the game is great, man.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to play that, and I'm looking forward to starting up maybe on Thursday. It sounds like once Vigilante City dies down, I'm going to get to play or run Palladium after the bomb for you guys, which are anthropomorphic animals after the like after nuclear war kind of thing. So that'll be fun. But it's not Gamma World where like you don't know what a gun is and you're trying to figure technology out. Like the base tech levels, like maybe 1980s.
Okay.
America, right? And it's kind of more a hopeful setting because you have like nations, animals. You have bad guys in the setting and all, but you have like established nations of animals and stuff. But so you're out adventuring and doing stuff. So I'm looking forward to running that game. That should be a lot of fun.
Nice, man. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey Joe, I appreciate your hopping on and talking with me. Is there anything going on that you want to, you want to push or anything you want to tell people to go check out?
Go check out, because the series just ended. Go check out Tales from My D&D campaign. It's really fun, man. There's 66 episodes. The first 20 or so are, less than 15 minutes long. It's a good time.
Very cool. Yeah, I have not checked that out. I will have to. Lately I've been listening, because I drive a lot. So I do listen to, I've for years, I didn't do actual plays at all.
Right.
But the Real Play Games podcast kind of sucked me in, and I've been listening to Real Play Games, and you can find them on Apple and all that stuff. And I'll put links in the show notes, but I've really enjoyed their stuff. So I'd recommend that. The other thing I would put out there, not a podcast or anything, or YouTube show, but there's a convention coming up in January called BSerCon 2, Electric Boogaloo, and what that is there used to be a podcast called Gaming and BS.
Yes.
And that podcast is now defunct, but the community has stayed together. They stayed strong, and they did an online convention last year, and they're doing another online convention this year. The proceeds go to Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Well, half of the proceeds go to that. And so, you're getting a good cause. It's like $10 for a ticket for the whole weekend to attend all the games you want. So go check that out. I'm running 3 games there.
Is it an online?
Yeah. It's all online. Yeah, okay. It's all online convention.
Are you going to put a link to it in the show notes?
I am. Yeah, I'll have a link in the show notes. People can go sign up. a bunch of games there. The tickets are for sale now, so you can
Okay.
and you can sign up for games now.
What games are you running?
I'm running Barbarians of Lemuria. I'm running Boot Hill, and I'm going to run Boot Hill's an old TSR Western game. Barbarians of
Yeah.
Lemuria is a sword and sorcery game, and then I'm running Dicey Tales, which is a
Yeah.
pulp RPG based off the Barbarians of Lemuria mechanics, but it's more of a two fists of pulp. So they're talking like Indiana Jones or
Right.
whatever. It'll be more like an Indiana Jones kind of that era, that 30s era. Might not be, you might not be an archaeologist, but it's gonna be like that 30s era, 40s
Cool.
era game.
Are people able, when they buy their tickets, to request what games they're going to be in?
Oh yeah. What you do is you sign up. It's on Tabletop Events, and you get your ticket, and then you go in there and you can sign up for whatever games you want. If the game
You
you're
hear that,
interested,
folks?
what's that?
Yeah, I was just telling the folks they can be in a game run by Jason Connerly, man. Get out there, go play a game.
That's true. Or you could be in a game by a good GM. But I would love for folks to join my games. But the cool thing is, the other thing is, you can, even if a game is filled up, you can sign on to be a standby, and the GMs can see that. So if enough people end up being standbys, they may run that game again, do another session or something like that. So
Cool.
yeah, but go check that out, folks. And I think that's about it. So Joe, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure being here, Jason.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure having you on there. One of our original, Cerebrevore players, right? So excellent. Well, folks, if you want to talk about anything you've heard today, you can call into Cerebrevore and leave us feedback. All the ways to reach us are in the show notes. There's a SpeakPipe account. You can go to the Anchor website and leave a message there. You can email us. So reach out, let us know what you think. We love comments from listeners. We'll play them on the air. And I guess all that's left to be said is be excellent to each other.
A Nerds and Co broadcast, Cerebrevore podcast. Let's savor all the flavors from the spinal tap straw. The all stars and pods past, Cerebrevore podcast. You're counting down your last as you admire them all. Something's blowing your teeth, or suicide your brain. Baby, what I mean is this machine's a freak, and from what I understand, that's what it is. Don't look now, the Cerebrevore is coming, and all that's left is the crying and the running. You can bring it, you can pile, you can bomb in any order. Just another brain of real tossers running for the point. Just a snap like a one. Did I stutter? Beer and pain. Always bread and butter, you can eat on a baby, and his customers never say it. It's savoring the flavor of the memories it created.
We got some snow last night.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Is it? I would think snow would be a pain in the ass for you.
No, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to do anything, so it's cool. It looks pretty.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's bad, it shuts the city down. There's no drivers or nothing. Like the buses stop running and shit.
Yeah.
It's not. We're not built for it. And even though it's happened like many years in a row, they're still like, well, it probably won't happen next year.
Mm-hmm.
It's good stuff, man.